On this video, I'll guide you through one of Western North Carolina's most popular adventure trails, Herrikan Creek. I'll go over what you should expect, things to watch out for, and a few important notes to keep in mind. Now let's first start with how you get to the trail. The entrance to Herrikan Creek is roughly an hour west of Asheville, North Carolina. Traveling on the westbound lanes of I-40, you'll want to make sure you are in the right lane and start slowing as soon as you pass mile marker 8. Go ahead and turn on your indicator and be ready to turn in just past the exit 7 and Harmon-Den sign. As soon as the guardrail ends, this is where you're going to want to turn in. You can actually find the start of the trail by typing in Herrikan Creek Road on Google Maps. The only signage you're going to see is a 233 road placard. This is a National Forest road, and the only time I am aware that they close it is during maintenance. Go ahead and drive in a short distance, and then you will find an open area where you can air down and engage four-wheel drive. Here's a quick fun fact that I want to get out of the way. Most locals do not call this Herrikan, they pronounce it Herrikan Creek. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. I don't know what the history of it is, but most people from the area, when they talk to me about this trail, actually call it Herrikan, not Hurricane. So if you're from the area, I apologize in advance for constantly calling it Herrikan. In years past, I am told that Herrikan Creek was passable in something as tame as a Subaru Outback. The path has definitely broken down considerably since that time. No, you don't need something as extreme as my 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon on 40-inch tall Nitto trail grapplers. However, I would still recommend a high clearance four-wheel drive. A stock Jeep Wrangler Rubicon or Toyota Tacoma TRD would work perfectly fine and have all of the right equipment right out of the gate. That being said, I do want to note that while the majority of Herrikan Creek is fairly easy, there are a few sections that will be challenging and one section that can be downright dangerous when wet. It's also worth noting that this trail is fairly overgrown in spots. So if you're not a big fan of scratches or you drive a full-size 4x4, this might not be a great trail for you. On the Onyx Off-Road app, Herrikan Creek has a rating of 4 out of 10, which I feel is pretty accurate. There's really only one spot where locking differentials would be helpful, but I'll go more into that later. The start of this trail is pretty mellow and winds up the side of the mountain along the Herrikan Creek, hence the name. You'll notice a few gates and even houses as you get a bit further in. There is a good assortment here of private property that runs along this path. While it should go without saying, I will reiterate, be sure to stay on the path and away from any gates and homes along the way. Talking with locals, this has been a bit of an issue in the past, and there still seems to be some confusion, at least by me, as to which of the camping spots you'll find along the way are technically okay for you to camp on. Keep in mind that Herrikan Creek is only around 6 miles long, so you can get through it fairly quickly. In fact, if you're not trying to film like I am, you can probably get in and out in about 3 hours time. This was filmed during the summer, so the foliage was fairly thick. I'd like to go back in the wintertime just to see how much better you can basically see the overlooks and the landscape around you. Your two most common, let's say, challenges along the way will be mud and water crossings. As is the case with any water crossing, use caution and be mindful that water levels can change wildly depending on season and rainfall amounts. Much of the trail was fairly dry on the day I explored it, but that's very much so not the case over the years, and there's plenty of documentation to support that this can be a very challenging place to off-road if it's wet. The first real obstacle that I found was this large rock outcropping, which admittedly I could have easily driven around. However, how much fun would that be? For those wondering about the bed conversion you see on my Gladiator, it's actually a tray bed and canopy made by a company called Mitts Alloy out of Australia. I'll put some links here so you can check it out if you want to know more about that setup. Now, just north of that is one of the more sort of random and well-known pieces of history along the trail, and that is this shell of a bus, or at least what's left of a bus. It's in pretty rough shape, and I'm guessing this road was much easier at the time this thing was originally parked here. I would explore with caution, to say the least. Once you sort of get your fill of, I don't know, looking at this relic, you'll kind of continue along your climb up the mountain. There are a few sections that get a little tight, but nothing so difficult that my long wheelbase Gladiator had a hard time. A little past halfway, you will come to a fairly big creek crossing. While it has a hard bottom, this is one of the sections that I've seen be extremely deep from others who have documented this trail. Here's a section that can be fairly challenging when wet, especially considering how off-camber it is and its proximity to the tree on the passenger side. It's going to pitch you definitely a little bit toward the tree, and it looks like this tree's had a few markings on it from bigger vehicles. If you do have a full-size truck, I think that's going to be tight, but passable for sure. The next leg of this trail has a bit more rocks at the base than the previous, which is why it's a good idea to air down your tires. If not, this section will create a rough ride for you. You're not doing any extreme rock crawling here, so you don't need to go crazy with your air pressure, but the lower, the better the ride is going to be. In fact, I would go ahead and disconnect your sway bar if you can do that easily, just to smooth out the overall ride. A little bit further up the mountain, you will find what's arguably the most difficult and potentially dangerous section of the trail. It's not terribly off camber, at least it doesn't look it, but it will push your rig toward the drop off and twist up the suspension a good bit. This is where locking differentials will really help, along with a good set of off-road oriented tires. A good set of mud terrains like my trail grapplers are worth their weight in gold when you get to something like this. Again, my Jeep's a little overkill for this trail, but this is definitely a spot that if you have a smaller tired vehicle, especially something that doesn't have a lot of clearance, it's gonna be a bit challenging. From that point on, you can take a deep breath. There are really no obstacles that are going to be that dangerous. From here, the path remains a little bumpy, but not really difficult. The last optional challenge you'll find along the trail is this hill climb section. I'm sure with a little rain, this would be a very interesting spot. Staying to the left will keep you out of the runoff trenches, but it will be a little tight to do so with a wider vehicle. This section is particularly important. Not only is it the last real spot you can flex out your vehicle, but shortly after this, you'll find that the road splits. When you get to the Y in the road, stay to the left. It will keep you on what my map indicates is the correct Herrikan Creek Trail. From here, the last leg is a twisty run up and to the top of the mountain. I will be the first to admit that I'm not a big fan of dash cam trail videos, and yet here I am doing one. What I was trying to accomplish with this was to put together as much of a guide as I could to showcase what this trail is like, or at least how it was when I visited. It's also worth noting that there's nothing stating that this is a one-way trail, but I have always known of the I-40 side as the unofficial start of the trail. There's not a lot of places to let vehicles by, so I would recommend starting on the westbound side of I-40 as I did. For those wanting to explore more around the Great Smoky Mountains, I highly recommend doing a Google search of the Smoky Mountain 1000 and the SM 500. These routes were originally laid out by adventure bikes and have been adopted by the overland community. None of these trails along those routes are very difficult, but they are incredibly scenic. It's about 60-40 mix of backcountry roads and gravel, but it's a great way if you want to get out and camp and explore the region. I would recommend fall as the ideal time to do this. I've been thinking about putting together my own sort of more challenging version of this, something that I'll be talking a little bit more about in a future video. At the exit of the trail, it opens up onto a small gravel intersection. Here you can air up and get your rig ready for the road. I took a right to exit the trail, which put me on a long gravel road and eventually turned into a 2-lane paved road that got me back onto I-40 again. I was heading to Tennessee, so this is exactly where I needed to be. Well, that's about all I have on the Herrikan Creek Trail. Hopefully you found this video informative and helpful. If you do have any questions, just drop them right in the comments. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to see you on the trail. Take care.